It was a night shift. A colleague asked me to cover for him. However, I refused him without hesitation. Why? Because in a past life, I had agreed to help a colleague by answering an emergency call. But what was the result? The patient couldn't be saved and passed away. The family blamed me for delaying the rescue. Yet in truth, from the moment I answered the call to dispatching the ambulance, I hadn't made a single mistake. Faced with the family's furious accusations, my colleague shockingly insisted that my handling of the call was unprofessional. That day, the emergency call was from none other than Xiang Dingkai, the deceased. At that moment, I had thought. My fiancé, who grew up with me, and my childhood friend. Both of them would surely step forward to vouch for me, right? But to my utter disbelief, my fiancé, a doctor, didn't help me. Instead, she accused me as well, saying Xiang Dingkai's call handling was indeed unprofessional. And my childhood friend, now a police officer, produced a recording of the call. In that recording, the careless, roundabout tone of the voice speaking to the patient. It was undeniably my own voice. I had no way to argue against it. In the end, I was stabbed to death by the enraged family with a knife. Even in death, I couldn't understand why the voice in the recording was mine. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day my good friend asked me to cover his shift. And today, Kes said he wasn't feeling well during the night shift. You were told to let him rest more, and you were the one to answer the calls as the shift change happened. My childhood friend, Liu Ryan, adjusted her glasses and coldly reminded me. I glanced at the familiar lounge, and my thoughts finally pulled away from the phantom pain coursing through my body. I had been reborn. Seeing me dazed for so long, Dang Kes scowled and elbowed me hard in the stomach. Are you deaf? I told you I'm not feeling well. Hurry up and change into your uniform and get on duty. In my previous life, I had covered Dang Kes's shift. That night, there were 10 harassing calls in a row. When I finally had a moment to catch my breath, just as I was about to take a sip of water, Dang Ke, who had been resting at the workstation, suddenly lifted his head. Stop slacking off, he barked. I'm not feeling well, so you need to take every single call. As I drank my water, I was about to respond when the phone at the workstation rang again. Though Deng Ke was only a few centimeters away from the phone, he furrowed his brows in pain and yelled at me. What are you standing there for? Pick it up already. Can you bear the responsibility if a patient dies because of you? I frowned, signaling for him to quiet down, and immediately answered the call. On the other end was a university student staying in a dormitory. Hearing his faint, dying voice, I quickly pinpointed his location and immediately arranged for an ambulance to be dispatched. The moment I hung up, it had taken less than 2 minutes. But I hadn't expected that. Even with such flawless, professional handling, it still brought me a fatal disaster. The next day, just as I finished my night shift, I was blocked at the emergency center entrance by the boy's teacher and family members. Before I could even react to what was happening, a man swung his fist directly at my eye. It was then I realized the boy had passed away the night before because the ambulance hadn't arrived in time to save him. But neither I nor the ambulance had wasted a single moment. Faced with the family's accusations, Deng Ke pointed at me and harshly scolded. It was Xiang Dingkai who took the call. He spent a whole 10 minutes asking pointless questions about the boy's name and address. I had thought my fiancé, who grew up with me, and my childhood friend would defend me. But to my shock, my fiancé, a doctor, directly accused me. Yes, she said, last night it was Xiaokai on duty. He does have a habit of fussing over irrelevant details. And my childhood friend, now a police officer, played a recording of my call with the deceased, certified to have no signs of tampering. The audio clearly captured my voice, leading the boy in circles with frivolous questioning. I had no way to defend myself. I was stabbed to death by the grieving family, right there and then. To this day, I can't understand why my voice in the recording had turned into that of someone speaking so carelessly with laughter and detours. Now that I've been given another chance at life, I'm determined to uncover the truth. You and Ke are colleagues after all. Don't tell me you won't even help with such a small favor. Liu Ryan's voice in the lounge pulled me out of my memories once again. In my previous life, I had loved Liu Ryan too much. So much so that I followed everything she said without question, never once considering my own thoughts. But later, when Deng Ke framed me, she firmly insisted that it was my unprofessional work at fault, standing resolutely on Deng Ke's side, even if it meant sacrificing my life. Thinking about it now, a deep sorrow filled my heart. I glanced at Deng Ke. His smug, overbearing demeanor showed no signs of someone feeling unwell. If anything, he exuded an air of confidence, as if everything was going exactly as planned. Come to think of it, the events of my previous life were probably no coincidence. I turned around, clearing my throat with deliberate coughs as I looked at their expectant faces. Ahem, sorry, I said. I've caught a cold these past few days. Tonight's work will have to be split between me and Kes separately. For the first time, Deng Ke was met with rejection and rolled his eyes at me. It's just a little cough. You're acting like I owe you something big. Even Liu Ryan, who was usually gentle, darkened her expression, lowering her voice as she questioned me. Xiang Ding Kai, has all your decency gone to the docs? It's just a small favor we're asking for, and yet you keep finding excuses to avoid it? I looked at the two of them, their anxious and cornered expressions. The memories of my previous life flashed vividly before my eyes. I turned my back to them, changed into my uniform, and ignored their remarks. The night shift was originally meant to be handled by just me and Deng Ke. After I refused him, he seemed visibly disappointed, recalling the inexplicable evidence that appeared in my previous life. A chill ran down my spine. It felt as though they had somehow known in advance that the boy was going to die. As a medical worker, I couldn't bear to stand by and watch a young life, a blooming flower of our country, wither away. If only I had arranged for an ambulance earlier, perhaps the boy's life could have been saved. Instinctively, I considered contacting an ambulance in advance to head to the boys' school. But soon, I dismissed the thought. If I notified the ambulance beforehand, based on what happened in my previous life, any incident that occurred would surely be blamed on me by Deng Ke again. As I pondered ways to break out of this trap, I continued to get dressed and prepare for my shift. When I walked to the workstation, a crucial detail from my previous life suddenly came back to me. My childhood friend, Li Weiwei, now a police officer, was always upright and principled. The recording she presented had no signs of being tampered with, and it became the ironclad evidence that sealed my fate in shame. But for something that never actually happened, how did that recording even exist? Because our mothers were best friends. Li Weiwei and I had grown up together since kindergarten. We were childhood friends. Later, I started dating Liu Ryan. Li Weiwei hugged me and said she would always be my sister without blood ties. Yet in the end, she was the one who personally pushed me into hell. Why did it have to be her? Thinking about this, my heart felt as if it had been pierced by needles, unbearable and sharp. Lost in my thoughts, without realizing it, the time when the boy would call for emergency assistance was fast approaching. Deng Ke was staring at me intently, like a hawk monitoring its prey. But his hand betrayed him. He nervously drew one black circle after another on the duty log with his pen. With my knowledge of psychology, I could tell it was a sign of guilt and anxiety. But this time, I didn't plan to let him off easily. I stood up abruptly and declared loudly, Ke, I think I've got a stomach issue. You'll have to handle this on your own. After that, I dashed straight to the restroom. The moment I left, the shrill sound of the phone ringing filled the air. I could hear Deng Ke grinding his teeth in frustration as he sat at the desk, cursing under his breath for a long time. Finally, begrudgingly, He picked up the phone, but instead of confirming the emergency details, he spent an inordinate amount of time asking about the caller's gender, age, and repeatedly questioning whether the person was an adult or a scammer. Hidden in the corner, I recorded every word while holding myself back from rushing forward to intervene. Meanwhile, I secretly transferred the boy's call to the nearest hospital's emergency department, only after receiving confirmation from the hospital that the boy had been helped in time. Did I step out from my hiding spot? When I returned to my workstation, I saw Deng Ken nervously hanging up the phone. As dawn broke, I changed out of my uniform and prepared to go off shift. But just as I reached the exit, I found the doorway blocked by a dense crowd of people. "You're the ones who killed my son. Give me back my boy's life. Who was on the phone last night? Tell him to get out here right now." The boy's father stood at the front, arms crossed, his booming voice demanding answers. The fat on his face quivered as he shouted. Terrified, Deng Ke shrank back, trying hard to appear calm, his eyes darting around, as if searching for me. Our colleague from the next shift, intimidated by the family's aggressive stance, hurriedly pointed at Deng Ke and said, "Yesterday's calls were handled by Deng Ke." Before Deng Ke could react, the boy's father grabbed him by the hair, yanked him up, and slapped him hard across the face. "So it was you, huh?" he bellowed. The slap left Deng Ke's face bruised and swollen. It took him a while to recover from the shock, and then he pointed toward the back of the crowd, rasping out, "No, it wasn't me. Xiang Dingkai took all the calls last night, and just like that, he tried to frame me again, leaving me surrounded by the furious family members. They beat me so badly I coughed up blood. But in this lifetime, I refuse to be his scapegoat. What's going on here?" I demanded, stepping forward. Liu Ryan's concerned voice suddenly broke through the crowd. She hadn't even had time to change her clothes, and rushed straight to the side of the battered and bruised Deng Ke. "Ah, Ke, what's going on? Why are you the one being beaten?" Deng Ke lay in her arms, looking utterly pitiful. "Ryan, all the calls last night were handled by Xiang Dingkai. You have to stand up for me." I watched as Liu Ryan, who in my previous life had been indifferent to my suffering, was now utterly frantic for Deng Ke. A wave of bitter sorrow surged in my heart. Noticing my gaze, she turned around, grabbed my collar, and dragged me in front of the boy's family. "Xiang Dingkai, forcing others to take responsibility for your mistakes. Is this how you were raised? How can someone like you even deserve to be my fiancé?" She grabbed my hair, forcing me to bow in front of the boy's family. "I'm so sorry," she said coldly. "Our workplace somehow ended up with a disgrace like Xiang Dingkai. Rest assured, even though he's my fiancé, I will never let him go unpunished." I stared at this woman, the woman I had loved for years and had planned to marry, unable to believe these words were coming from her mouth. The pain of realizing I had misplaced my love for so many years felt like a vast chasm swallowing me whole. I was so devastated I couldn't even speak. Summoning all the strength left in my body, I finally broke free from Liu Ryan's grip, hunched over, but quickly straightened up with determination. I didn't answer any calls last night. It was Deng Ke who handled the calls. You can check the call logs for proof. Deng Ke's phoenix eyes glared at me angrily, before he burst into tears, crying pitifully and protesting his innocence. "I wasn't feeling well last night. You handled all the calls and records yourself. Of course, you can say whatever you like now." I knew Ke wouldn't admit to the truth, so I immediately took out my phone to play the recording from last night. "Deng Ke, who answered the calls last night? Recordings don't lie." But just as the audio started playing, Liu Ryan intentionally tripped the boy's father. The man's sturdy arm grabbed me as he fell, pulling me down with him. I hit the ground hard, and my phone screen shattered into countless pieces on impact. When I picked it up again, the phone screen was already black. "Xiang Dingkai," Liu Ryan snapped. "What's wrong with you? You can't even hold on to evidence properly." She comforted the pitiful-looking Dang Ke, while glaring at me with contempt that brimmed with certainty of victory. Or maybe the so-called evidence is fake. Afraid you can't frame a Ke, you're resorting to sabotaging yourself? Her expression was so venomous that I could no longer reconcile her with the woman who once embraced me, promising to protect me for a lifetime. Ever since Dang Ke started working here, Liu Ryan's gaze had never lingered on me again since Dang Ke arrived. But back then, I loved her too deeply, so much that I blinded myself to reality. My hands trembled as I made one final attempt to explain. Even though my phone was broken, last night's recording wasn't the only copy. Why don't we retrieve the call records from last night? I asked. Let's see who's lying, me or Dang Ke. My words seemed to hit a nerve with Liu Ryan and Dang Ke. They exchanged a quick smirk before responding solemnly. Fine, they said. Let's let the police determine who the real culprit is. Their tone was confident, almost mocking. The gathered students, murmuring among themselves, chimed in. Exactly, let the police investigate. In front of justice, no darkness can hide. Such wicked acts deserve to be exposed. They should bring justice for the victim. In my past life, I had also believed that Li Weiwei would seek justice for me. But in the end, she was the one who pushed me into hell. Fortunately, this time, I had prepared for everything. As I remained silent, Dang Ke gave me a taunting smile. What's wrong, Xiang Dingkai? Are you afraid to face a police investigation? I glanced around the crowd and saw a familiar figure jogging toward us in her police uniform. Li Weiwei, the woman who once said she would always stand by my side. The one who promised to be my family. I took a deep breath, swallowing the lump in my throat, and asked her, with faint hope, Weiwei, as a police officer, I asked, you'll find the real culprit, right? But in the end, she avoided my gaze, her eyes dodging mine. The flicker of hesitation in her expression was a sharper blow than any accusation. Finally, she answered, her voice unsteady. Yes, I'll definitely uncover the truth and let justice prevail. I understood her unspoken message, and my heart sank into despair. I watched her begin the investigation. Dang Ke and Liu Ryan, seeing my dejection, sneered and mockingly said, if I were you, I'd just admit to the crime now. No need to waste everyone's time and resources. Xiang Dingkai, is this your plan, hoping it will help you escape punishment? Their arrogance made me laugh despite myself. Unable to resist, I retorted, why, Dang Ke? Are you feeling guilty already? But Dang Ke maintained his air of confidence. Xiang Dingkai, you're making a mistake not knowing when to yield. Wait and see. When the truth comes out, you'll get what's coming to you. The call system's recordings were soon retrieved. The audio from last night was publicly played in the emergency center's main hall, and in it, the voice that ignored the patient's pleas for help, persistently asking about gender and age. It was identical to mine, the same as in my previous life. The result was exactly the same. Even in this second chance at life, being betrayed by both my childhood friend and my fiancé felt like a weight suffocating me. My heart was as if thrown onto a mountain of knives and flames, burning with unbearable agony. Ever since Dang Ke entered my life, everything I had was slowly being taken away by him. In the eyes of Liu Ryan and Li Weiwei, I was no longer their loved one, but a mere obstacle in their pursuit of Dang Ke. At this moment, the emotions of the boy's family reached their peak. Shouting the same words as in my previous life, they demanded that I pay for his death with my life. Then, brandishing a sharp knife, they lunged toward me. Dang Ke screamed, shoving me directly toward the armed family member. Xiang Dingkai, go to hell! Just as the blade was about to slash across my throat, a loud voice rang out from the crowd. The recording is fake. I have the real recording here. From the crowd, an elderly woman with silver hair stepped forward, trembling slightly. She had an air of scholarly elegance, and as she approached us, she adjusted the glasses on her face. The boy's father froze in surprise, then quickly bowed respectfully to her. Teacher Zhang, He greeted her, "You've come." Teacher Jong gave him a comforting glance, then spoke with authority. "I'm the homeroom teacher of the deceased student. I've come to deliver evidence to the police. This is the phone the deceased used to make the call. Because of a class meeting yesterday where I taught the students about anti-fraud measures, all the students in my class had their call recordings enabled." At her words, Dang K's face turned pale. Liu Ryan and Li Weiwei's expressions turned visibly unnatural, as this was the trump card I had prepared for myself. Before last night's shift, I had relied on memories from my previous life to realize that the boys' school was my old alma mater. Even the homeroom teacher was the same. In my previous life, because she knew my character well, Teacher Jong had run herself ragged trying to prove my innocence. In the end, she had no choice but to give up when she couldn't find evidence. Because of this, the following year, Teacher Jong was anonymously reported by Dang Cat and others for falsifying records. She was reprimanded by the Education Bureau and lost her job, which was her sole livelihood. Now, given a second chance at life, I had thought long and hard about how to protect both the truth and Teacher Jong. So I subtly suggested to her to hold an anti-fraud class meeting. Unfortunately, it still wasn't enough to save the boy's life in the end. Trembling, Teacher Jong unlocked her phone. The arrogant voice of Dang Ket and the boy's faint but desperate cries for help began to play loudly from her phone. The entire room fell into complete silence. Someone finally spoke up. "Teacher Jang's recording is definitely more credible. By comparison, the recording provided by Officer Lee, though it also contained the boy asking for help, portrayed him sounding vibrant and full of energy. Nothing like someone on the brink of death." The contrast was clear. Dang K's actions were truly despicable. The boy had already been so weak, and yet Dang Ke still had the audacity to smirk. "Smirk my ass." The crowd's rising indignation turned Dang K's face pale, then red. But Li Weiwei patted his shoulder and sneered audibly. "You'll go to any lengths to frame Ke, won't you, even fabricating evidence like this?" She leisurely pulled a graduation photo out of her briefcase. My name and Teacher Jang's were both prominently listed on it. Who would have thought nowadays even the police need to prove themselves? "Xiang Dingkai, you're quite capable, I'll give you that. Too bad you didn't even try to cover your tracks when faking this evidence. Do you really think we wouldn't find out that you're also one of Teacher Jang's students?" The cold glint in her eyes felt like it could swallow me whole. Standing in front of Dang Ke, Liu Ryan added with an air of righteous indignation, "Aka has been our emergency center's exemplary call operator for months. His professional skills are beyond question. On the other hand, Xiang Dingkai, who prides himself on fixing the workplace, is always arguing with patients. Even though Xiang Dingkai is my fiancé, I have to speak the truth. The kind of person who could do something like last night's incident could only be Xiang Dingkai." The boy's father, upon learning that I was one of Teacher Jang's students, had already clenched his veins bulging fists. Liu Ryan's exaggerations and embellishments only made him even more furious. The boy's father walked straight up to Teacher Jong, barely containing his rage as he gritted his teeth and said, "Teacher Jong, I never thought someone as respected as you would protect a murderer." I interrupted him. Turning to Liu Ryan, who was twisting the truth without a hint of shame or guilt. "Are you willing to take responsibility for what you just said?" I asked. She nodded resolutely, and I turned my gaze to the officer standing behind Li Weiwei. "All right," I said. "Officer, let's announce the results of the forensic analysis." Before Teacher Jong arrived, we had discreetly entrusted the judicial department to verify the authenticity of both recordings. And now, the forensic report clearly stated, the recording submitted by Li Weiwei was AI generated. Dang Ke looked at Liu Ryan and Li Weiwei in disbelief, but no words came from his mouth. The boy's father, unable to suppress his fury any longer, shouted, "You monster! Give me back my son!" Then he grabbed Dang Ke by the hair and yanked him to the ground. Seeing this, The other family members, remembering the arrogance in the fake recording, stepped forward and began landing punches on him. How could you do such a thing in an emergency center? How dare you? A young boy begged you for help, and you still had the nerve to smirk. By the time the police led Dang-ke away, his face was so swollen it looked like that of a pig. Even clumps of his hair had been pulled out, leaving him muttering endlessly. It wasn't me. I didn't kill anyone, it wasn't me. Teacher Zhang and I accompanied the police as witnesses to the station. The moment I stepped out of the police station, my parents rushed forward and embraced me tightly. In my past life, after I was wrongfully accused and died, my parents and teacher Zhang worked tirelessly day and night to clear my name, searching for evidence to prove my innocence. But in the end, they were deceived and betrayed by Li Weiwei, dying on their way to find what was claimed to be proof. Now, being able to hold them again, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of peace and gratitude. Liu Ryan and Li Weiwei, however, didn't fare nearly as well. The moment they exited the police station, they were pelted with rotten eggs and leaves by the victim's family. Li Weiwei was immediately suspended from her position for falsifying evidence. Liu Ryan, who had been slated for a promotion this month, saw her opportunity go up in smoke. But neither of them believed they had done anything wrong. Instead, they blocked us at the police station entrance. Xiang Dingkai, Liu Ryan shouted, "How could you be so malicious? What you've done? You're trying to destroy AK. I can't believe I once treated you like a brother. Now I see how blind I was." Liu Ryan was even more shameless, saying, "Zikai, the only way to fix this is for you to admit everything and take the blame. Admit everything and take the blame for AK." Liu Ryan continued, "And I'll forgive you. I'll still consider you my fiancé." Her audacity made even my well-traveled parents laugh out of sheer disbelief. Teaming up with teacher Zhang, we chased the two of them away. On the drive home, my parents nervously warned me, "Zikai, even though you've grown up with them as childhood friends, sharing countless memories together, for the sake of your mental health, you should try associating more with normal people, not wanting to upset them." I smiled and agreed. But deep down, I couldn't help feeling a pang of sorrow. I knew exactly what my parents hadn't said aloud. My bonds with Liu Ryan and Li Weiwei spanned over 10 years. And they had practically grown up under my parents' watchful eyes. Yet everything had fallen apart because of Deng-ke, turning them into people incapable of distinguishing right from wrong. If my parents felt heartbroken, how much worse must it be for me, the true victim in all of this? But life can't always dwell on the past. Having been granted this second chance, I resolved to work even harder to achieve my dreams. I never expected, however, that only a few days later, Deng-ke would return to work. He strutted arrogantly into the office, while Liu Ryan hovered around him protectively, shielding him from the judgmental stares of our colleagues. What was even stranger, though, was the boy's father, who had been furious and violent toward Deng-ke just days ago, now acted as if Deng-ke were invisible whenever he saw him. Instead, he spent his days sitting outside the emergency center, demanding compensation from the facility. Taking advantage of the situation, Deng-ke spread rumors, claiming he was the innocent victim in all of this. At work, I could feel the weight of malicious stare surrounding both him and me. I gritted my teeth and endured until the end of my shift. As I was leaving, I saw Liu Ryan and Deng-ke's parents escorting him like bodyguards shielding a celebrity, ensuring he was securely placed in the car. From a distance, Deng-ke's mother noticed me. For some inexplicable reason, she got out of the car alone, looked around to make sure no one was watching, and discreetly tossed a file folder into a trash bin. Driven by some strange impulse, I walked over and picked it up. The first page revealed the result of a paternity test, showing that the boy, Meng Shen, was not biologically related to his supposed father. I found a quiet spot and carefully examined the entire file. Everything suddenly became clear, and all my questions were answered. Meanwhile, the normally calm workplace group chat was now buzzing with constant notification pings. I opened my phone and saw that it was Deng Ke, incessantly posting pictures and messages. The first image Deng Ke shared was a withdrawal of the lawsuit document, signed by Meng Shen's father, Meng Yang. Following that were several voice messages from Liu Ryan and Deng Ke, as if they were putting on a scripted performance. Deng Ke's hoarse voice sounded even more pitiful. "I'm sorry," he said. "I've caused my colleagues so much trouble lately. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have asked Xiang Dingkai to cover for me while I wasn't feeling well. Who would have thought he would use a voice changer to mimic my voice and frame me? He even let a life slip away just to harm me." At the time, I didn't argue back to avoid stirring more conflict with the family and to reduce the burden on the company. But that doesn't give Xiang Dingkai the right to twist the truth. Now, I've posted the real facts here in the group to let everyone see his true nature. To ensure attention, Liu Ryan helped him by sending several 200-unit red packets in the group chat. Colleagues eagerly claimed the red packets, and seeing that Meng Yang had already withdrawn the lawsuit, they began to turn on me. Since Meng Yang retracted his complaint, it proves that Ake wasn't at fault. Why else would Meng Yang go through such effort to withdraw it? Why are we still dealing with Meng Yang's daily disruptions at the emergency center? Gradually, the group chat filled with criticisms targeting me, while colleagues began justifying Deng Ke's actions. If Meng Yang withdrew the lawsuit, it must mean that Ake really didn't do anything wrong, and we're the ones being harassed every day because of this mess. It's because the real culprit, Xiang Dingkai, is still at large. Oh my god, this is so disgusting. He holds grudges against others and uses a death to frame them. And in the end, we all get dragged down with him. Who can feel safe working with someone like that? How do we know the next victim won't be one of us? Xiang Dingkai, why don't you just die already? Every day I have to work with someone like you. It makes me want to stab you and be done with it. Don't push me into committing a crime. Colleagues who usually sided with Deng Ke or tried to please Liu Ryan were quick to jump into the conversation. But by then, I no longer had the chance to respond. Just as I was about to type out a reply, a notification popped up on my screen. I had been removed from the group chat by Liu Ryan. The realization brought back a memory from long ago, back when Liu Ryan and I were still students. At the time, I was accused by the boys in our class of being a bully and troublemaker. The usually mild-tempered Liu Ryan became furious, flipping over a desk and loudly proclaiming that no matter the situation, anyone who falsely accused me would pay the price. It was her fierce defense of me back then that led us to grow closer, transitioning from high school sweethearts to lifelong partners. We made promises of a future together early on, vowing to always stand by each other's side. And now, that same person who once said she believed in and loved me unconditionally was the one who wove the very net meant to strangle me, while cutting every lifeline I could have used to prove my innocence. When I returned to work the next day, I was shunned by my colleagues, driven out to the company gates, where Meng Yang was still causing a scene. Leading the charge were Deng Ke and Liu Ryan, both looking smug and triumphant, as if today was meant to be my execution day. Li Weiwei, who had been dismissed from her role as a police officer, now served as a security guard at the emergency center, parading around with a group of hyper-energetic young girls, flaunting her new authority. Xiang Dingkai, she said mockingly, "If I were you, I'd quietly pay the compensation, resign voluntarily, and stop dragging everyone else into your mess. But only someone as shameless as you could keep doing this." Her demeanor was overbearing, a far cry from the upright and principled police officer she once was. I couldn't make sense of it, so I couldn't help but ask, "Do you all hate me so much that only my complete destruction will satisfy you?" I truly didn't understand. Whether it was Liu Ryan, my partner of 10 years, or Li Weiwei, my childhood friend, why had they pushed things to this irreparable breaking point? My question made Liu Ryan laugh scornfully. Then she turned on me, her voice sharp and cutting. If it weren't for your schemes and false accusations, would we be dealing with all this trouble now? You're a menace, using any means necessary to harm others. And now that you've been exposed, you want us to forgive you? When you've done something wrong, you must face the consequences. Now, on behalf of the emergency center, I am officially terminating you, Liu Ryan declared. Before I could respond, Li Weiwei chimed in, nodding in agreement. Meng Yang, she said, Dr. Liu is right. If you have grievances, you should take them up with the responsible party. Now that Xiang Dingkai has been fired, go to him for compensation. There's no reason to keep causing trouble here. This elaborate scheme to drag me down finally extinguished all the feelings I had held in my heart. As Meng Yang approached me with a menacing expression, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Who said Meng Shen is dead? I asked. Meng Shen is alive and well. Before anyone could react, a group of uniformed police officers surrounded the company entrance once more. The spectacle silenced the crowd of curious onlookers, including my colleagues and passers-by. Meng Yang froze mid-step, looking at Deng Ke in confusion. Caught off guard by Meng Yang's gaze, Deng Ke panicked and shouted at me, his tone laced with a desperate and threatening edge. Xiang Dingkai, what nonsense are you spouting now? Ignoring him completely, I threw down a thick stack of documents in front of everyone, then unlocking my phone. I played surveillance footage from the Liu family's home. The documents included the paternity test results for Deng Ke, Meng Yang, and Meng Shen. The results revealed that there was no biological relationship between Meng Shen and Meng Yang. However, the likelihood of Deng Ke being Meng Shen's biological father was as high as 99%. 99%. And in the surveillance footage clearly showed Deng Ke holding Liu Ryan in his arms, crying pitifully. Ryan, what should I do? I'm not my parents' biological son. If they find out, I'm done for. I heard that old man is filthy and disgusting, he continued, and he likes to target wealthy women. Recently, he's even been trying to find sugar mamas to support him. If I go back, I'll definitely be dragged down with him. He wept sorrowfully, his tear-filled eyes tugging at Liu Ryan's heartstrings. Moved, she threw herself into his arms and comforted him softly. But the words she spoke were chilling. Don't be afraid, she cooed. Life is full of unforeseen challenges. When the time comes, we'll just have Xiao Kai take the blame for you. And if an investigation happens, Li Weiwei can help. She's a police officer after all. She makes sure neither Xiao Kai nor that Meng Shen can rise again. They'll die without leaving evidence. And even if your parents do find out, they only have you as their son. How could they bear to let you suffer further? Hearing this, Deng Ke's father, who had been defending him just moments ago, suddenly looked defeated. His mother, who was supporting him, turned to me and nodded. Her eyes filled with gratitude. She had been the first to discover this evidence. But Deng Ke and Liu Ryan had used threats against her husband's life to keep her silent, until the day she saw me in the parking lot. It was only by using my help that she finally had the chance to reveal the truth to the world. When Meng Yang heard the conspiracy between Deng Ke and Liu Ryan, his anger boiled over and he pulled out a fruit knife, aiming it at them. I thought you truly accepted me as family. That's why I withdrew the lawsuit, he roared. But this is what you really think of me? Meng Shen, my good, obedient, and sensible son. I willingly supported him through graduate school. And I never once thought about using wealthy women to fund us. He never wanted to take your privileged life as a spoiled heir, either. And yet, you're so malicious. You deliberately killed him. Hearing Meng Yang's words, Deng Ke's parents, who had just begun to recover from the shock, became furious again. They reacted instantly, joining Meng Yang's side, shouting, "Give us back our son's life." As they lunged toward Deng Ke to demand justice, the crowd of onlookers, already incensed by the revelations, began chanting, "Murderer, pay for your crimes." Liu Ryan desperately shielded Deng Ke, pleading in a low voice. Uncle, auntie, please calm down. No matter what, Ke is still your son. But her plea was met with a swift blow from Deng Ke's father's cane. Get out of here, he roared. You accomplice! I don't have such an evil son. Give me back my poor child's life. Meanwhile, Li Weiwei, trying to protect Deng Ke, fought Meng Yang barehanded, even as he wielded the knife. Using her physical strength, she shielded Deng Ke as tightly as she could. But despite Li Weiwei's efforts, she was no match for Meng Yang, who wielded a knife and was blinded by hatred. By the time the police managed to separate the chaotic group, Li Weiwei was covered in multiple stab wounds, her body drenched in blood. Liu Ryan's legs were broken by Deng Ke's father's cane, leaving her unable to walk. Even Deng Ke, who had been protected the most, was bruised all over, with patches of his hair torn out, leaving him nearly bald in some spots. As the police took them away, I saw regret and tears in their eyes for the first time. But it had nothing to do with me anymore. The person they most owed an apology to was no longer in this world. Due to the severity of the incident, the case was swiftly investigated by a special task force. The truth came to light, and it was revealed that Deng Ke and Liu Ryan had abused their positions to commit premeditated murder. The crime was deemed exceptionally heinous. Even if it wasn't classified as such, they would still spend the rest of their lives repenting in prison. Li Weiwei, already burdened with a prior criminal record, was found guilty on multiple counts due to this incident. Not only did she lose her job, but she also faced a lengthy prison sentence. As for me, though I was forced to resign, the incident brought me widespread attention. The court where I had once applied to be a mediator reached out to me with an offer. This gave me the chance to reconsider my career path. My parents, as always, offered their unconditional support for my decisions. I thought to myself, after some time, I would take them on a trip somewhere to relax and unwind. Thankfully, the future is long, and hope remains. And so, everything came to an end.